The way I sit makes it look like I'm way shorter than you. Oh, wait. Ah, it's true. So.
Hey everyone, welcome to the first official episode of WrestleMania IX. We know you've been waiting a while for this video, but it's finally
Some of
here.
us have a job.
Anyways, we know you've been waiting a long time, not a long time, but we know you've been waiting for this video, and here it is. Since by the time you watch this, the video's already been edited and uploaded to YouTube. You can see the title down here. WrestleMania IX. Here we go.
Live and on location.
Yeah.
Notice it's not the same set as, the preview tape. Due to some difficulties, we had to move it. We may have to do this a couple times, but it'll be only the two locations that we film in, guys. Predominantly be the other one, the original one, at my place. But for now, we're doing it here at Sean's. So
change it up a little bit, variety, spice of life. So here we go. WrestleMania IX, April 4th, 1993. Caesar's Palace, Las Vegas, Nevada. More specifically, the parking lot of Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas, Nevada.
That's the crazy thing that, WWF at the time was able to get the okay to pull off an entire pay-per-view. Not only just a pay-per-view, their big dog pay-per-view, their big dollar pay-per-view. Pull it off in the parking lot of one of the biggest, most important chains of Las Vegas lore of all time in the parking lot.
Yeah, right.
And they were able to get that. That still blows my mind to this day that they were able to do it. And not only that, I mean, this is WrestleMania IX. And one thing, watching the video again and thinking of all the times that I watched it previously, including the first one, it just continues to come to my mind what we were talking about before. The pageantry that is WrestleMania IX is just so over the top.
Yeah.
That's what WrestleMania was always supposed to be, was that pageantry. They talked about it from the first one. The very first one was it's going to be all about the grand show.
Yeah, this is the Super Bowl of pro wrestling.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So it's going to be pageantry and over the topness and all that. And it's going to be the, not to get hokey and all macho man, but all the pomp and circumstance.
Oh yeah.
I mean, and they, getting back to the stadium being in the parking lot, they still drew almost 17,000 people.
In a parking lot.
Yeah, in a parking lot. The gate was over $1 million, which in '93 was unheard of for a wrestling show, even a pay-per-view. This was the WWF's first outside WrestleMania. According to Wikipedia, I could swear it was their first outside pay-per-view ever, but whatever. It's also the debut of good old JR, Jim Ross, his first pay-per-view. And going back and watching this, and this is something you brought up while we were watching it, was listening to Jim Ross's voice from when he first came to the WWF till later on in his career. His voice, if you watch the pay-per-view, his voice is very high-pitched.
Yeah.
As opposed to, now I don't know if it was the Bell's palsy that affected his voice, or he just matured as a commentator and learned how to regulate the tone. But it's very high-pitched, and you'll hear it, like if you go back and watch old WCW, NWA, Jim Crockett, old stuff that Jim Ross did before he was, famous. You'll hear that high-pitched, rapid delivery that he was known for back then.
It was almost kind of nasally, almost.
Yeah.
Very high-pitched like this when he talked. And then nowadays what we know Jim Ross as is, it's Stone Cold!
Yeah.
Stone Cold! That's the Jim Ross we know nowadays.
I think what it is, and for the hardcore wrestling fans out there, it's a lot of the influence of Gordon Soley on Jim Ross's announcing style, because he's always said that Gordon was his idol. He always looked up to him as a mentor for his announcing style. So I think that's a lot of what it was. And then he came into his own, put his own spin on it. And it just, it progressed over time.
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, what watching WrestleMania 9 the first time, it wasn't Vince McMahon announcing, and you brought Macho Man out. So you have, Bobby the Brain Heenan, where love him or hate him, I mean, there is no in between. You either love Bobby the Brain Heenan or you absolutely despise them. And he was good at making you despise him, right? That's what he was supposed to do. Yeah. He is the ultimate in douchebaggery, the ultimate scumbag, and he was phenomenal at it. As much as I hated him, I give him all the respect in the world for what he did. Then you have Jim Ross. You got the new guy to WWF coming in here.
The straight man, the middle of the road, non-biased play-by-play guy.
Yeah, and then you bring in Macho Man. You bring in Macho Man Randy Savage, who, at the time, he had just divorced Elizabeth recently.
Yeah.
And he was at the height of his being out of his mind kind of talk. Whether it had to do with whatever it was he was doing outside, or losing Miss Elizabeth, or whatever it is, you brought him in there, and that touch of insanity to the announce team, it was great. I remember, when I was first watched it in '93, I remember, I thought these guys are all new to me, with the exception of Heenan.
Yeah.
And Macho Man announcing, a match was new to me.
He had done Raw at its inception, but he hadn't done anything big like a pay-per-view.
Yeah.
He was just a Monday night guy with Vince.
Yep.
And like you had said, there was no Vince to play off of.
Yep. So my feeling when I was little was I didn't know what to expect out of this. I mean, wasn't little,
We were in
93,
high school.
16,
Yeah.
Going on 17, and it's not, it's I didn't know what to expect because I was so used to Gorilla and Vince and, Bobby the Brain Heenan, that's what I was used to. So I was a little, what to expect. Yeah, apprehensive is a good word for it. Yeah. So.
All right, so the beginning of the pay-per-view, they play up the pageantry of Caesar's Palace, make it seem like it's old, old Rome, and they bring out these actors who I would have to assume worked at the time at Caesar's Palace.
Yeah, probably.
And they bring out a man and a woman who are dressed as Caesar and Cleopatra, and they come out on a giant elephant. And and they come out to the ring, and then they bring out Macho Man, and everybody for this thing, all the ring announcers, the commentators, the ring announcer, even the ringside doctor, as we noticed, were all dressed in togas, and the entrance was very, it was a pageant, just big pageantry. Macho Man comes out on the caravan with the Vestal Virgins and their feet and grapes, and it's very Randy Savage.
I don't think they were very Vestal. nor Virgin.
It's Vegas. I'm pretty sure they weren't. But we'll go along with it.
Sure.
And finally, in true Bobby Heenan fashion, they bring him out on the camel. And not only do they bring him out on the camel, but he's facing the wrong way. He comes out backwards. You can hear him screaming through the the microphone on the camera.
Turn this thing around.
Yeah, he's like, get me off this thing, and it's just just being to coin a phrase, he's being vintage Bobby Heenan.
Oh yeah, 100%. And with talking about being younger, I didn't really notice it. Even at that age, I didn't notice it, man. But Cleopatra, they were big. They were big, guys.
So if nothing else, that's worth your $9.99 a month.
Oh yeah.
And don't forget, February, it's free.
Yeah.
So WWE Network sponsor.
$9.99.
So we get all the commentators out there. They give you all their little, they go through their little spiel and introducing themselves and arguing with each other and making fun of Bobby Heenan and so we get to the first match of the pay-per-view. Now, I did a little research online and I found out that there was a dark match, which, for those of you not too familiar with the terms, a dark match is a match that isn't aired. So it's a match that took place before the pay-per-view started, and it was Tito Santana and Papa Shango, who in '93, Tito Santana was kind of on his way out. Mm-hmm. and Papa Shango was kind of on his way in.
Yeah.
So it was probably one of those, passing the torch kind of matches. And I don't know why it wasn't televised. I think it would have been a great match.
I would guess strictly time constraints is what kept it, but
Right.
like back then you didn't hear too much about dark matches,
True.
Especially at pay-per-view. So to find out that kind of happened, I mean, Tito Santana, phenomenal. As younger, he was awesome.
Yeah.
And
Papa Shango, I mean, whether he was Papa Shango or he was the Godfather, and I hate to, break that, fact down for you and, burst your fantasy world, but they were the same guy.
you should know this.
I know. If you're watching this video, these are things that you should know.
Not a spoiler alert.
Just basic knowledge. These are things that happened 20 years ago. If you haven't figured it out by now, I'm sorry that I have to spoil it for you. Apparently, there was another match. I don't remember. I think it was Boss Man versus somebody that got cut for time constraints.
Because he was doing hard time.
which is odd because this pay-per-view was 2 hours and 39 minutes long, and most of the pay-per-views in the 80s and 90s were 3 hours.
Yeah.
Not like today where, they're struggling to get to the 2 hour and 50-minute mark.
Yep.
And you stretch matches out and do more interviews and cut promos at a pay-per-view.
Yeah. And that's one of the things when we were younger that was so much better about the pay-per-views was it was just action to action to action, whereas nowadays it's all right, what's with all the promos? We're not looking for promos in the middle of matches in a pay-per-view anymore. Yeah. Get back to that WWE, please.
Because with this match, with this pay-per-view, and you'll see it as we go through the matches, it's match, backstage interview. The guy who's getting interviewed is literally on his way out to the ring. It's a quick stop off with Mean Gene, boom, out to the ring for the match. Cut back to Mean Gene, cut to Todd Pettengill, which is a name I know a lot of you haven't heard in a long time. Cut to Todd Pettengill in the crowd being, acting the fool and doing his thing. I mean, that was his shtick.
He was the side bit and he was good at it.
Yeah. And he knew his place. And
absolutely.
He excelled at it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Those guys like him, Kevin Kelly, all those guys that they brought in to be, comic relief, they knew what they were doing and they did it very well.
I still want to be that guy. I think I'm pretty funny.
You want to be the next Jonathan Coachman?
Sure. Then I get a job at
Then you go
ESPN,
work
and
for
all is
ESPN,
right in the
yeah.
world. I mean, where else should a guy like me be but ESPN eventually?
All right, let's get on with this pay-per-view.
So, guys, it starts, the first introduction, they flip it over to, the one and the only Howard Fink. However, his name for this pay-per-view, given the whole Grand Roman architecture of the pay-per-view,
Fincus Maximus.
yeah, and I loved it.
Yeah.
I loved it back then, and I still love it today because the Fink is the man, and the Fincus Maximus was it was perfect. So
here's the thing, just to as we described in our first video, it's a lot of juxtaposing against not only our opinions of the pay-per-views that happened back then, but also to kind of compare and contrast it against pay-per-views of today. So if you were to sit down and say, oh, this Sunday you're going to watch Fastlane. Mm-hmm. The first match out of the gate is just going to be some one-on-one, or maybe even a tag team match, but it's not going to be for a title or anything like that. Well, this is WrestleMania. This is the grandest stage of them all. So the first match we have for the Intercontinental title.
yeah,
And something that I pointed out while we were watching it was, this was back when the Intercontinental title actually meant something.
yeah,
There was only one, what they refer to as the second tier title, because you have the world title and then you have the Intercontinental title below it. The Intercontinental title meant something. It meant that you were on the track to getting a shot at the world title. And nowadays it's like a throwaway title. It's like, oh, we'll give it to Ziggler, and then we're going to throw it to Harper, and then, we'll give it back to Ziggler because we're not mad at him anymore. Yeah. It's like they dangle it in front of them like a piece of candy to say, ooh, reach for that brass ring that Vince is always talking about.
The brass ring. The only brass ring is the one holding my towels in the bathroom.
Yeah, right.
The Intercontinental title nowadays, is disrespected. And I know there's a lot of people out there who feel the same way. We're not the only ones here. This isn't some, new revelation. But back then, you knew if a guy held the Intercontinental title, very soon he was getting a shot at the world title, and you knew what that meant back then. We all knew what that meant. That dude's got the white belt on. Guess what? That guy's going up to champ soon, man. And it was great because it was great to know kind of what was coming with that. You didn't need dirt sheets to know who was going to be the next guy to fight for a title. Mm-hmm. You know, all these people who think they know what's going on the internet. And look, I don't do as much of this internet reading with the wrestling blogs and all that stuff because it doesn't interest me to, read other people's, thought of, they think they know what's coming. And 99% of the time it's wrong. Mm-hmm. There's a few guys out there who get it pretty right. But for the most part, it's wrong, and it doesn't interest me to read that. You're entitled to your opinions, and I love them. And I'm sure down below this video, we're going to see a lot of opinions. We're going to see a lot of comments. We're going to see a lot of opinions. And bring them, because we want to see them. Right. We want to know what you guys think, and all that. And the only way we're going to get them is comments. But I'm not big on the whole, what do they call it, the IWC, the Internet Wrestling Community, okay? Yeah. Obviously, we're trying to become part of that. But, we're not really into the whole insider dirt sheet. Back then, you knew what you were getting. You knew the white belt meant that dude was going to be fighting within the next couple of months for a title. And it kind of helped you understand the way that everything was kind of structured then. So
yeah, and speaking of Intercontinental Champions that went on to become the WWF Champion, this match is Shawn Michaels, who had the title. And he was accompanied to the ring by Luna Vachon, and this was the first time you had seen her. Kind of taken aback by her. She does come from a wrestling background. Her father and her uncle were both big wrestlers back in the AWA.
Yeah.
It was him versus Tatanka, who was a great superstar in his own right.
Yeah.
Should have been. He was way underutilized. And he came out with Sensational Sherry, who up until briefly before WrestleMania had been actually with Shawn Michaels. Mm-hmm. Good match. The entrances, were good. It was, good play with the commentary to play off of, the surprise of, who's this
scary
person coming out with Shawn Michaels. The typical heel fashion of Shawn Michaels to stall the beginning of the match. He's got to take all his gear off. He's got to hand the belt away. He's got to take his sunglasses off. So start the match on his own terms, which is, you don't see a lot of guys doing that these days. But these two guys, very high energy, lots of small flurries of moves back and forth, some good high spots off the ropes, off the ring apron to outside. Mm-hmm. You had mentioned there was one spot that Shawn had done that you were impressed with how much force he had gotten. Considering it was just off the apron instead of,
he
top rope.
One of the moves on the outside, Tatanka was, outside the ring, and Shawn Michaels is just on the apron. He got, an incredible amount of height coming off the apron, no use of ropes or nothing like that, And for me, back then, I wasn't really, into Shawn Michaels as a character. I just thought he was too arrogant, Right. And part of it was, we were in high school. So, the guy who gets all the chicks, nobody kind of likes that dude, And Shawn Michaels was just that. He played the entire crowd to the women. 100%. Oh, yeah. 100%. Oh, yeah. Because even girls that we went to school with back then who really weren't into wrestling, they knew who Shawn Michaels was. They knew it. Yeah. For me, I was huge Tatanka fan, and I wish he had done more in the WWF. But seeing this match, for me, I thought it was going to be a great match because as much as I didn't like Shawn Michaels, I wanted to see Tatanka kick his ass. But I knew he was a really good wrestler then. Yeah. Whereas, now you look back and you watch, how good Shawn Michaels was in the ring. And it's like, all right, this dude... this dude was awesome. But then it was just, Shawn Michaels was really good, and I really liked Tatanka. And again, I wish that he had done more. And in this match, seeing some of the stuff he pulled off, they put together a really good match.
Oh, yeah.
So,
yeah. And the one thing I noticed about not only this match, but the entire pay-per-view, the things you don't really see nowadays, And maybe it's because of the advent of the internet and people get bored really easily, or it's just short attention span.
Yeah.
But I did notice that the crowd was really
Thanks,
into it
iPhone.
for the whole pay-per-view. Really into the
Yeah.
matches, you'd hit a spot and the crowd would just erupt.
Yeah, response immediately.
Yeah.
And it's not just spotty responses. It was the entire crowd that
And
responded.
nothing disrespectful. You never heard any boring chants. Nothing like that. Guys missed moves, and we'll get into that as we go over the individual matches. But guys missed moves, and nowadays you hear the crowd, yell at people, yell at the wrestlers, you effed up, and it's like, you didn't hear it back then. People were just excited to see somebody attempt a move.
Yeah.
And it was just amazing to see that much energy from a crowd for a whole, almost 3 hours of pay-per-view.
Yeah.
The other thing I also noticed that I took a note of comparing 93 to 2015 is the commentators actually commentated the matches. They talked about what was going on in the match. They would touch on little things about, where the feud had been. Like with the first match, they talked about the ladies being outside. They talked about the history of what happened with the two of them. But it wasn't just sitting there and telling a story that wasn't even related to the match. You watch, even if you watch Monday Night Raw nowadays, they'll sit there and they'll talk about two guys that aren't even in the ring.
Yeah, I think today's announce, crews. Now look, don't get us wrong. Okay, we're talking about the first match here. We don't hate wrestling nowadays. It's just, it's different, and it is a little bit harder to watch. It really is, because the announcers talk so much that has nothing to do with what's going on, nor does it have anything to do with another storyline even. Every once in a while back then, they'd be talking about a match, and they'd go off a little bit because there was another match coming up that kind of pertained or tied into the match that was going on. They'd bring that match up,
right,
but they'd always bring it back to the match that was going on. Whereas today, these guys talk about stuff that has nothing to do, with anything that's going on that Monday night or the upcoming pay-per-view, nothing like that. And
no.
We know that it drives all of us nuts. It does. Where these guys during this match, they keep it to the match. They talked about, obviously, Bobby Brain Heenan is doing his shtick with, talking about how, scary Luna Vachon is. And he's busting Jim Ross's balls, which was funny, about how she must be from Oklahoma, right, which is funny. Yeah. To me, it was hilarious. And watching it now, it's even funnier, because back then, you kind of didn't really get it too much when you were our age, but it's funny now, to listen to him do that. They talked about Sherry and how Sherry used to be with Shawn Michaels. Everything tied into how they were conversating. And they talked about the match that was going on in front of you. Yep. They called your spots. They called the high spots. They called great moments in the match. Yeah. And when you got those two guys in the ring, you had great moments in the match.
Yeah. And two other things about it, and it was something that I had thought of, was it may just depend on the three people that you have at the table. But you look at, this was a 3-man announce table in 93, and nowadays there's still a 3-man announce table. But nowadays, they're stepping on each other, they're looking for things to say, they're cracking the stupid jokes and telling, references from the 70s that they think is funny. But, your demographic nowadays is, 10 to 14-year-olds.
Yeah.
They don't get these references. I mean, you're talking about, these are 50-year-old men commentating, and nothing is relevant.
Referencing stuff that's funny to them.
Yeah.
What Sean said is right. It's like they're trying to one-up each other on the mic when, back in the day with this pay-per-view and, others after it, and obviously all the ones before, when Vince was on, Vince was a good pace man at the booth, Yeah. But these guys, did a great job of keeping it to the point, and they didn't, try to one-up each other on the mic. Obviously Heenan is playing the joke.
Right.
And you got Macho Man, who's the heat against Heenan.
Right.
And you got Jim Ross as the straight man.
Right.
And they played those parts well. they didn't try to just jumble everything together. You knew who was who.
Right.
Whereas nowadays,
everything gets kind of
who's
bottled.
JBL? You don't know if he's a good guy. You don't know if he's a bad guy. He's always talking over somebody too. And it drives me insane.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like you said, nowadays they're trying to one up each other.
Yeah.
Back then they would play off each other.
Yes.
And it was complimentary, and it was it was good. It
Fluid.
was very fluid.
Yeah.
And like I said, there was no stepping on each other like Eric said JBL does nowadays, especially to Booker T. I've noticed he steps all over him.
Yeah. I think a lot of that's jealousy because Booker T is 5-time, 5-time, 5-time. All right, I won't do the rest. You can count.
Is JBL even a Hall of Famer?
Not yet.
Okay, well that's another.
I give it to him. He probably
Booker T.
Maybe not. Booker T.
Well, Booker T. is
Should
already
have
in the Hall.
I know, and he should have been.
Yeah.
It's not even a question. JBL, maybe. As much as I love the APA, don't get me wrong. I own my APA shirts, and I still love when, Ron Simmons. Damn! As much as they make him a cheesy character doing that, I still love it. I get a jolt out of it every time.
So, at the end of the match, I didn't even notice what had happened. I was trying to figure it out. Apparently, there was a count out. I thought at first it was a disqualification because the referee had gotten involved in it. And so apparently, Tatanka won the match by count out. And for those of you that know that this rule is still in effect, at least, is that pinfalls or countouts and
disqualification.
Countouts and disqualifications. Thank you. The title does not change hands. I'm waiting for that rule to change, like every other rule that they arbitrarily enforce and don't enforce. But that's another show.
I think that'll count. Like if Triple H ever has another title match, which probably won't. All of a sudden, that rule's going to go out the window. Yeah. Goodbye. Stephanie will come out. Which, by the way, I love you. Trips, we're going to fight.
And then, I guess to perpetuate a feud between the women, which I don't remember it kind of went somewhere, I guess.
Not for long, but yeah, it did.
Was, Sherry was, she was celebrating Tatanka's win, and Luna came back out and attacked her from the back. And
a couple of good rib shots.
Beat her up pretty good.
Yeah.
And Tatanka ended up having to carry her to the back. And
yep. That's kind of where it ended.
Yeah, that was pretty much the end of it for the whole pay-per-view. Like, you didn't hear any, there were no updates later on, like they do nowadays, that we have an update from the back.
Let's go to the back.
So, it was a good first match. You got the crowd hyped up.
Yep. You got Shawn Michaels, legend. Yeah, you got Tatanka, who, is maybe not legend status, but still back in the day, everybody loved him. I mean, there's still days where, I'll be in certain places and, you just hear that, the Tatanka, and here I come with a chop on somebody. I mean, Angus, who's going to be joining us, he felt the wrath of that more than a couple times, being at the house. I still do it nowadays because he was an influential character. Maybe not the superstar, of the caliber, obviously, of Shawn Michaels, legendary status.
Right.
But he was influential, especially then.
Yeah.
Because he represented a whole nother, before him you had Chief J. Strongbow.
Yeah.
And he really didn't have a lot of other strong, Indian characters. So.
Yeah, so, and like I said at the beginning of the video, that this pay-per-view just flows. It goes from match to backstage interview to match.
Mm-hmm.
So we cut back to backstage, and we cut to Mean Gene, who...
Legend.
One of the best interviewers ever. Interviewing the Steiner brothers, who at this time were relatively new to the WWF. They had spent their time in the NWA/WCW.
Mm-hmm.
And they had made their way over to the WWF. And this was, I think, their first pay-per-view. It was their first WrestleMania, at least.
First WrestleMania, absolutely.
So their match, first tag team match of the night, is them versus the Head Shrinkers, who, if you go by, if you know your history, their names were Samu and Fatu. Well, I got to stop and I got to take a moment here to sidetrack myself and say to all the haters out there who think that Rikishi doesn't deserve to be in the Hall of Fame.
You are wrong.
Do you realize who Fatu and the Head Shrinkers was? It was Rikishi. And we're talking, this is 1993.
Yeah.
And they also had been in WCW prior to this.
Yeah.
So he did a lot for the business. He was longevity like crazy.
Mm.
And if all you can come up with is, the
Too cool.
the gangster too cool
Yeah.
gimmick, and you think that alone doesn't get him into the Hall of Fame, then
You don't know your stuff.
exactly, you have no idea what you're talking about.
Hey, the too cool whole group, Scotty and him and Grandmaster, they were influential enough in their own right. Maybe, not so much for the other two to be Hall of Famers, obviously.
Right.
But when you had Rikishi there, he was a massive, massive character at the time. I'm not talking about his size. He was a massive character for WWF. Massive. And he comes obviously from the long line of family, this history, the Samoans.
The Samoan dynasty?
Yeah, he's part of it, and he's a huge part of it, guys. If you talk to anybody who knows about the Samoan history, it's, they'll tell you his part of the lineage is, in stone. He's set in stone just as much as the Rock's is, and Afa and Sika, who, by the way, who led these guys out,
Yeah, Afa was their manager.
Yeah.
And then you think about, and he's made other contributions to the industry. I mean, look at his boys.
Yep.
They're amazing.
Yeah.
And, okay, so getting back to 1993. Sorry, we had to sidetrack you to 2015 there for a second. 1993, I mean, great match. 4 heavyweight ground and pounders. Not a lot of high spots. Scotty had a few. And this is, as I said before while we were watching the pay-per-view, this is before steroids rotted Scott Steiner's brain.
Which is a shame. I'll go back to, me, again, going back to the way it was for me back in 93. Sophomore in high school. I kind of knew what I wanted to do. I didn't play, football in high school, obviously. There were, things keeping me from playing, which you guys don't need to know about. But I still played outside of school. And to this day, I kind of wish I wanted to play football at Michigan. I wanted to go play football at the University of Michigan. Mm-hmm. I didn't care if I sat on a bench. I truly thought I was going to end up going there for football. I was, trying to figure out a way where if I'm not playing for high school, how am I still going to get in? So for me, sophomore year in high school, I'm thinking I'm going to go to Michigan. They had everything I want besides football. I could have played baseball there, but they had a major that I wanted. They were a great school for what I wanted to go to school for. And I applied there, as a junior. But sophomore year, knowing that's what I wanted, these guys come out and they're, if you knew anything about collegiate wrestling at the time, which I knew a little bit, paid attention to it, but wasn't like, we didn't have wrestling in school, so it wasn't something that we really, would have been connected to. These guys came out from Michigan. They legitimately were Michigan wrestlers. Yeah. Seeing them come out, in the Michigan jackets, I instantly, they had me. I was a fan of theirs instantly. And then watching them wrestle, there was a lot of talent in the two of them. They could throw high spots. They could do low spots. Yeah. They can move really, really well for their sizes. And they were big dudes, too. They were just built like brick shit houses, So for me, watching them, they were definitely the ones I was going for in that match. They come out in those Michigan jackets, and it was, I'm all for them. And it really was, for me watching it, back in the day, that's all I cared about was these guys got to win because those Michigan boys, I want to go there, in their crazy colored tights. They always had really crazy colored tights. And I definitely wanted them to win the match.
Yeah.
So
the one thing I noticed throughout the match, and this is because, I said that Steiner just came over from WCW, as had Jim Ross. Mm. If you watch the match and you listen to the commentary, every time one of the Steiners hits with a clothesline, he doesn't call it a clothesline. He calls it a Steiner line because that's what they called it in WCW. I don't know why. It's just something they came up with. All their moves had their name in them for some reason.
Yep.
It was a good match. Had had a good pace to it. Alpha was, outside the ring. He got involved with it a little bit.
Of course.
As, as they do, because, the head drinkers at the time, they were the heels. And, some good agile moves. One spot that I think of is one of the Samoans had Rick Steiner up on his shoulders, and the second one was going to dive off the top rope at him, clothesline, splash, whatever he was going to do to him. And as he approached him, being on this man's shoulders, Rick grabs him and power slams him, and the two of them fall to the mat, off of the shoulders to the mat. And just to see a man of that bulk execute a move like that
With a guy that big.
Yeah, with another guy
Yeah.
that big, we're talking 500-600 pounds of combined mass here, to be able to grab in the right places and to spin and turn and land right and not hurt anybody. It's just amazing.
And back in the day, that was something I didn't, really notice was that big of a spot. But watching it now, this is what we were talking about. Is that really was a great spot. Because of given where Rick was, and given Fatu coming off the top, and being able to turn with him, and the two of them to come down in a great power slam.
Yeah.
It was really, really well done and executed.
Yeah.
And those are kind of spots that that you missed when you were a little younger and really weren't paying a whole lot of attention. Now you're just looking at the overall match.
Yeah.
So.
And one of to get to the end of the match, we used Scott's finishing move, which is known as the Frankensteiner. Again, here we see Steiner in the name of the move. It's basically, he throws the guy into the ropes, and it's a head scissors takeover. He jumps up, wraps his legs around the guy's neck, and basically flips him over so he lands on his back.
Yeah.
Well,
Guys, he missed it.
Here's our first box move of the night.
It was bad. It was real bad.
He threw him off the ropes, jumped up, clamped his legs around him, and as he went to flip himself over, I don't know if it was sweaty or what was going on, but his legs just slipped right off, threw himself to the mat.
Yeah.
So Fatu basically had to take himself, and if you've ever seen somebody throw themselves into an aerial somersault onto their back, it was that.
And it's even funnier when it's a big dude like that.
And when we were, 17 years old, we just thought it was the move. It's like, hey, this is the momentum of, even though he slipped off, the momentum of him grabbing him and throwing him still caused him to go that way. You watch it as an adult and you go, that man just took himself and just threw himself to the ground. What grown man does that to himself?
Well, the show must go on.
Exactly,
right?
yeah.
You
gotta
can't
hit the spot.
You got to hit the spot. It doesn't matter if the other guy, misses what he's doing and botches it. Whatever you guys want to call it nowadays. They did it. They finished it off. So you end up with the Steiners winning the match. A little aside to, we were talking about where we were watching it. Just a little aside, guys, because we talked about, Rick and, Scott. And Scott having, the steroids just, rotting his brain out. That guy was super talented.
Mm-hmm.
Super talented. And he didn't need to do all that stuff to become Big Papa Pump. He was already a big dude and cut, right?
And think about how smart they were, that they were legitimately billed as academic All-Americans from Michigan. And it's
true. Yeah.
Yeah.
I had the privilege, to actually meet him one night. I had to work late with a bunch of guys from work, from my old job. We worked late. I want to say we got out about 11:30, which is quite late for, when we closed. And we went to the diner down the street. You've been to that diner a million times in Milford,
Oh, yeah.
I forget what it's called. The Olympian or the
The
Athenian. I don't remember
Athenian.
which one
The
it is.
Athenian.
Next to Hojo's.
The
old one.
Athenian.
So we decided, we were all off the next day because we were going to see Monday Night Raw at Mohegan Sun. There was a whole bunch of us going. There was like 11 of us going total. People I worked with and some of our significant others at the time. So we go there and we sit down, and one of us, I forget who it wasn't me, looks over at the diner part of the place, and it's like, that dude is massive over there, right? So I was like, is that Scott Steiner sitting over there? No way, dude. What's he doing in Milford, Connecticut in the Olympia or the Athenian, right?
Right.
So I'm thinking it's not him. And I got to go to the bathroom. So I'm like, all right, dude, this is perfect time. I'm going to walk by because the bathroom's right next to where he was sitting. So I walk by, and I'm like, holy shit. You know, that's Scott Steiner, right? So I'm in the bathroom like, Scott Steiner's sitting out there. So I come out of the bathroom, and there's a dude sitting there like in his face trying to get him to pay attention to him. He's, Mr. Steiner, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, dude, he goes, I don't mind talking. He goes, but I'm trying to eat. I'm trying to finish my meal and get out of here. It's late. The guy keeps going. And the guys at my table are like all standing up and they're looking at what's going on. And a couple of them start to get up. And I know what they're getting up for. The same reason that I'm looking at this guy. Get him away from the dude,
Yeah.
He's trying to eat. Let him eat. Guys, if you ever meet any celebrities, I don't care who it is, if they're eating or they're with their families and they look like they're, doing what they want to do, leave them alone, okay? So I go up to the dude and I tap him on the shoulder. I'm like, yo, man, the guy's trying to eat. Why don't you leave him alone? I'm a big fan too, but you don't see anybody at my table bothering this guy. So the guy, walks away. And I'm sure it's not due to me, Sometimes I could be a little intimidating, but in this case, I wasn't trying to be. It was just, leave the dude alone. And I think hearing another voice come over, the guy walked away and he eventually left, ended up leaving. So we're eating. I go back to my table and we're eating, and Scott Steiner just across the diner says, thanks a lot for that. No problem, man. It's just common courtesy, right? I am a fan, but I'm not going to bother you. You're eating. So 10, 15 minutes goes by and he finishes eating, and, I was like, see you later, Mr. Steiner. He gets up and he comes over to our table. And, I got a couple guys sitting at my table that are even bigger, Scott Steiner fans than me. One of them, his whole bodybuilding routine was all built on Scott Steiner at the time. Massive Scott Steiner. He starts to geek out at the table. I'm, a little geeked out. I got a buddy at the table. He's geeked out too. And he comes over and he says, I just want to say thanks again. And he asked us, are you guys coming to Raw? And I was like, yeah, well, actually, everybody at this table except for one person is coming to Raw tomorrow night, and we're all bringing a bunch of people. And I said, Mr. Steiner, I said, I just want to say, one of the reasons I'm a big fan is I wanted to play football at Michigan, and, there's a couple things, injuries that kept me from being able to do that. But I still, love Michigan. And I, big Michigan basketball fan, and he says, well, if you're coming to Raw tomorrow night, do you have anything Michigan? And I said, yeah, actually, I got a big Michigan hockey jersey. I said, because, when it comes to the, Frozen Four, at the time, Michigan was huge, and, they were one of the big shots. And he was like, wear it tomorrow, and I'll make sure you get on TV. And I was, he ain't going to do that. He got too much time, man. So we go to Monday Night Raw the next night. It's a Mohegan Sun. It's a lot of fun. There's a bunch of us there. We're having a great time watching it. And he's doing a bench press competition. For the life of me, I can't remember who it is that he's having a bench press competition with. I'm sure, you guys can put it in the comments if you remember who it was. But he comes out, the first dude does his bench press, and Scott Steiner's music comes up, and I did what he told me to. I wore my Michigan football jersey. I got my Michigan hat on too, right? And he comes out on the stage, and I stood up. And I'm on the opposite side of the ring from where he is, because they're up on the concourse,
right,
of the stage. And I'm on the opposite side of the ring. And I stand up. I'm the only dude standing up. He looks right at me and points. I get home that night, and I got phone calls. He did exactly what he told me he was going to do. He said if I wore my Michigan stuff, and if I stood up when he came out, he would make sure that I got on TV. And lo and behold, guys, I was on Monday Night Raw. And that camera was up on me pretty close. It was me, and a couple of people I was with. And I thought that was really cool that this dude, came through with what he said.
Yeah.
So, it is a damn shame with the jumble. But back then, man, that was like the coolest thing. It was so cool. So, rant over.
So the next thing we get to is match is over, so we go back to another backstage interview.
Mean Gene.
And this one,
stash of the century too, by the way.
Doink the Clown. And I have to say, for the 90s, there was nobody better.
Yeah.
He was amazing at what he did. always in character, no matter whether he was a face or a heel. He was always good at what he did. And in this match, I think, I gotta be honest, with it being one of the lower card matches, I still think it almost stole the show just because of what they pulled off during the match. So he does, his rambling, psychotic interview. And so now we get to the third match, and it's Kona Crush versus Doink the Clown. Now this is, Crush. Brian Adams, he was Crush in Demolition when Demolition was towards its, the end of its run. And then he, the gimmick changed, and he became the giant head squeezing Hawaiian, which for people who don't know, and we didn't know this before
He
watching
really
the
was
pay-per-view,
from Kona, Hawaii.
he actually was Hawaiian.
No.
This was a good match. Once again, it's two really big guys going at it, so it's very ground based, very deliberate, slow paced, methodical, just back and forth, and high impact blows, and not a lot of high flying stuff. Crush does a little bit, but
You're not gonna see a lot of technicality. They're not technical wrestlers.
these
they're
guys were brawlers.
Yeah.
And once again, I mean, the crowd was into it. Match was good. The commentators talking about the story, and then we get 2/3 of the way through the match, and here's where, pardon the wrestling term, this is where the swerve comes in.
Now, Doink had hinted at it in his interview with Mean Gene. He had said, something along the lines of Crush was going to be seeing double tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it turns out that's what it was. A second Doink had appeared
From under the ring.
Under the ring.
The old under the ring gimmick.
Yeah. He showed up with the cast. The fake arm that Doink had already beaten Crush up with previously. And he showed up with it. And he got Crush with it. And back in the day, seeing two Doinks was, oh man, one Doink is creepy enough because the dude played creep real well.
Yeah.
Guys, if you're the younger viewers and you haven't watched Doink, you want to see a guy that played creep
The creepy
real
clown.
well. That guy nailed it. There were kids that we remember going to shows that there were kids actually crying and just from his music. You heard the music. It started off with the carnival happy stuff, and it just deteriorated. And it was well done music. And there were kids that cried as soon as they heard the music because they knew what was coming. It's, man, Doink's coming out. And he used to taunt people in the ring, but he taunted people in the audience. Kids, too. He focused on some kids, which made him, even creepier. And they wouldn't get away with it today because there'd be too many parents. Oh, my God, he's picking on kids.
Yeah.
Back then, it was great. And for us being old enough that it wouldn't bother us, it was really cool to see.
And
so you had the second Crush show up.
And getting to the whole PG era thing, one thing I forgot to mention about the Shawn Michaels Tatanka match was about how Jim Ross mentioned during the match how big of a Tatanka fan he was because he was from Oklahoma, which, quote unquote, is the land of the red man.
Yeah.
Not a statement you could get away with saying on television these days.
Daniel Snyder, stick to your guns, man. Don't change the Redskins' name. Legendary.
I mean, nowadays, they would have suspended him for 30 days and they would have had to issue a big statement about how, it was inappropriate, it was insensitive to the Native Americans and blah, blah, blah. But just out of nowhere, it was just nonchalantly said. No malice, no racism.
No.
Just said it.
And don't get us wrong, guys. We're not being racist either with the undertone. It's just, there's a little too much sensitivity nowadays.
So
this guy can say it. He's a Native American.
So speaking of blatant racism, after the Crush and Doink match is over, they cut back to Todd Pettengill again, who's in the crowd, and he's talking to these Japanese cameramen who are there for the WWF title match because Yokozuna, who storyline was Japanese, even though he was actually Samoan in real life, was there. And when he asked them for their reaction to this match that they just saw with the two Doink the Clowns, they give these very racist, very Charlie Chan-esque reactions. Yes, the what sounds like the dubbed laughter from old Japanese movies. It's very Charlie Chan. It's very racist, and again, it's not something you can get away with today. But the '90s, they were a different time.
I think it's quite possible that dude's laugh from there may have been used later on down the road because it was perfect stereotype laugh. Yeah. It was great, whether it was intentional or not.
It was just.
It's hilarious to see.
It was the perfect stereotypical Japanese dubbed over laughter.
Yeah.
Martial arts movies, where the guy's lips move and the words don't match what they're saying.
What do you do? You okay?
So that was.
Wait. We talked about this at the end of the match too, right? So the match is over, and Doink wins the match. And out comes the second referee, and he starts telling the referee that was in the ring that he saw from the back. I saw a second, and we talked about how nowadays you don't have this kind of stuff happen. The referee comes out, and they're very demonstrative in their movements.
Yeah, very over-exaggerated.
Yeah, he's like this. He's up here with the two, and he's going like this to say underneath the ring. It was to let the crowd, you had said it, it was to let the crowd know what was going on. They're not mic'd up, and they're trying to continue the storyline. And the storyline needs to be told to the crowd for them to understand everything that's going on. We don't hear it all. So being demonstrative and being, over the top with their movements tells you what's going on. If you're sitting in that crowd, you see a guy going like this, and he's pointing under the ring, and he says another one there, he's telling the ref, and you can tell there's a second one under the ring. They look under the ring, lo and behold, there's no second Doink is there. He's imagining that. The illusion is there.
Yeah.
So.
All right. So, after our funny racism that we go through, we get to the fourth match. Now, I
like this was.
Yeah, that's racist. And I was amazed at the pace of the matches and how many matches they were able to fit into this pay-per-view.
Yeah.
We get to the fourth match, another non-title match. This one is Razor Ramon and Bob Backlund.
Oh.
Now, at the time, 1993, Bob Backlund was 43 years old. Let me let that sink in for a second. 43. Scott Hall at the time, who was Razor Ramon, and if you haven't figured that one out either, I'm sorry I spoiled that for you too. He was probably in his late 20s. I mean, he'd been around for a while. He was in the AWA so maybe he was in his early 30s, but he was in really good shape.
Yep.
And for a man like Bob Backlund to go 10, 15, 20 minutes with this man in the ring and put on a good match, mind you, it was very... you had Razor Ramon, who was, the Cuban brawler, and, he was, he's smashing in the face and all this. And
but still technically sound.
Yeah.
Razor Ramon, he belongs in the Hall of Fame. He really does. He should be there. Because he wasn't just the Cuban brawler. Scott Hall was great. He could wrestle with the best of them.
Yeah.
If he had to make a technical match, which with Bob Backlund, that's exactly what you have to do. Bob Backlund, legendary in the ring. One of the best technical guys of all time. And then you got Scott Hall, who he can adapt to a lot of different matches. I mean, we talked about it. One of the greatest matches of all time that I ever saw was Shawn Michaels and Razor Ramon. And I'm sure a lot of other people are going to agree, the latter match. Yeah. However, you're talking, again, one of the best technical wrestlers, was Shawn Michaels. He could do so much, and Scott Hall can go toe-to-toe with him. And if he needed to brawl, that dude could brawl too. For me, Razor Ramon, is one of the best. Scott Hall is one of the best wrestlers. Right. Razor Ramon, for me, for my dollar back then, that was who I was pulling for. As much as Bob Backlund was, the American, and, there were a lot of ties to Connecticut and stuff like that with Bob Backlund. that's definitely who I was pulling for back then.
And again, like the Scott Steiner thing, although this was storyline, this was before Bob Backlund lost his mind and started putting everybody in the crossface chicken wing and
for no reason.
Tap out for no reason whatsoever.
Yeah.
Great match, and I have to say that even though it ended with Razor Ramon using a simple move like the inside cradle to get the pin, it was still a great match, and it still played as a good ending. It wasn't like, oh, that's lame, you beat him with a small package. Come on. You couldn't do better than that. Like, you didn't give him the Razor's Edge. It was a technical match, like you had said, that this is what you needed to do against Bob Backlund, who's a technical wrestler.
Yep.
So he beat him with a technical move.
Yep. I know back then Bob Backlund was hurting a little bit. He had some back issues and some hip issues going on. If I don't recall, it was then, so I don't think he would have been able to take a Razor's Edge.
That might be why they steered away from anything high impact.
But
No suplexes during the match.
Nope.
There was nothing high impact.
But it was a lot of technicality,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what makes I'm a big technicality. I love technical matches, much more than super high spots. As fun as those are, and I like brawlers, but I love technically well done matches.
Give me a Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels match any
All
day.
All day long. Yeah.
And that's the Iron Man match. That's for another day.
We'll get there.
So again, match is over. We flow back to the backstage interview. And this one is the tag team champions, Money Incorporated, who are the $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase and Erwin R. Shyster, better known as IRS. Your favorite person.
Tax time, guy. Don't forget to file your taxes very soon.
And the one thing we had brought up during this match is both of these men are, technically Ted DiBiase is second generation of 3, but legitimately first generation of second generation wrestlers.
Mm-hmm.
Ted DiBiase's son, obviously Ted DiBiase Jr., and IRS, who is, plug your ears if you don't want to hear this one, Mike Rotundo and his boys, and keep them plugged, is Bray Wyatt, who used to be Husky Harris, and Bo Dallas. Yeah. Those are his boys. So one thing we had thought of was don't touch the Bray Wyatt gimmick because you stumbled on some gold with that.
Bray Wyatt's gimmick is fantastic.
But you don't see Ted DiBiase Jr. anymore. As far as we know, he's still employed with the company. Bo Dallas is struggling. I think he's injured, but he was on the downslope with this whole Bo Leave gimmick thing, and it's awful. Why not take these two boys who are the sons of the originals and make them a new incarnation of Money Incorporated, kind of like they did with Legion of Doom. They made Legion of Doom 2000.
Yep.
Make them Money Incorporated 2.0, or call it something.
I say call it Money Inc. Just call it Money Inc. Plain and simple.
And we could come up with, obviously he's Ted DiBiase Jr., so we really don't have to change that much. And if you repackage Bo Dallas, give him a name that goes along with the IRS gimmick, but make it something different. Or, since it's Ted DiBiase Jr., we could just make him Erwin R. Shyster Jr.
Yeah.
And boom, there you go, WWE. I just wrote a whole 6 months worth of storylines for you.
Yeah, I really think there's a lot of wasted talent in the WWE today. There really is. And Bo Dallas, for the odd character that it is, they play at that he's kind of a bad guy and he's kind of a douche, but he's the good guy because he's inspirational.
He reminds the gimmick reminds me of Simon Dean. Remember Simon Dean with the Simon system?
He
thinks he's doing good, but everybody hates him because he's a pretentious D-bag.
That's exactly it. Yeah, and I think he's shown spots of being able to wrestle really well.
Well, when your father's Mike Rotundo, and plug your ears again, and your cousin is Barry Windham, and your brother's name is Windham because your father named him after Barry Windham.
Yeah.
You might want to have some wrestling prowess.
Yeah, and he does. and so does Ted DiBiase Jr. He's shown the flashes being able to do it, but he's just been never given the time. Guys, the WWE needs to rebuild that tag team. They need to bring it back. We talked about it during the match. You got to bring back the tag team division. Stop trying to shove one storyline down everybody's throats all week. All week or for 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Go back to splitting it up. You got to bring back the tag team division. And guys, it's quite possible. We believe it. Again, you guys can leave it in your comments below if you agree with us or not.
Yeah.
We really think they should bring back a second incarnation of Money Inc. And these guys being, the next generation from these guys who are legends.
Yeah.
Who doesn't, know the $1 Million Man? Everybody's got a price. Who doesn't know that? Who doesn't remember IRS? Bring these guys back, give them a second incarnation of Money Inc. and send them on their way. Obviously, you're going to make them just as bad as they had the original Money Inc. They're going to be just as bad.
Heels, to the nth degree.
Yep.
Because the problem is, and we discussed this while we were watching the pay-per-view, like you can count on one hand how many tag teams there are in the tag team division right now. And the storylines never involve...
We'll cut this out.
Yeah.
It's Rob. I'll have to call him back.
Alright, so we're going to edit that. So basically, we figured it out, and you could count on one hand how many tag teams there are in the tag team division. And the problem is that the storyline that's going on currently usually only involves 2 of them. Yeah. So at the moment, you got the Usos, who are the champions, and I honestly didn't remember that until earlier today. That's how great this tag team division is you can't even think of who the champions are against... Who were they fighting at the pay-per-view? I don't even...
Off the top of my head, I don't remember. But as far as like today's, tag team division, it seems like every time they bring a tag team in, somebody else goes away all of a sudden. So it's the same 3 or 4 rotating. They're rotating out, and it isn't right.
They brought in the Ascension, which that in itself is a whole video.
Yeah,
we're not going to get into that. Yeah. But they brought in the Ascension, and at the same time, they're in the midst of breaking up Miz and Mizdow and Golden Stardust. So you're losing 2 tag teams, and you only brought 1 in.
Yeah.
I might not be that good at math. Well, actually, I am, but...
He is.
Losing 2, gaining 1 sounds like you're losing. It's a negative game.
That's
awful.
Give me $10 and I'll give you 5 back.
Right.
Only one person wins in that equation. So, but yeah, WWE
and it's
fix the tag team division because
if it's not the fans, we ain't winning anything in this scenario.
Nah. So back to WrestleMania IX.
So, anyways, the 5th match, and this match I like to give a little background on. Because as you guys will figure out as we do these older pay-per-views, I'm the huge Hulk Hogan fan. This is how this is going to play out. I'm the big Hulk Hogan fan. This one over here, not a Hulk Hogan fan. Ever.
Nope.
And he sucks for it. But anyways.
I'm as all-American as it gets, guys, but the whole Hulk Hogan thing just never got me. There were other guys that did. However... in this match, one of the guys that did get me, that I got hooked on, was his partner. And it was Brutus Barber Beefcake.
So here's the backstory on this match, since it's Hogan and it's the match that everybody knows most about, besides the end of the pay-per-view, which we'll get to at the end. Basically, Money Inc. was basically harassing Brutus Beefcake. IRS used to have this gold briefcase that he used to carry around with him, and they smashed Brutus in the face with it. Storyline wise, broke bones in his face. He had to wear the titanium mask on his face. Now, at the time in 1993, Hulk Hogan was not in the WWF. I'm sure he was still employed there, but he wasn't wrestling matches. He had gone away, injuries. Who knows what it is. Let's see, this is WrestleMania IX. So WrestleMania 8 was when he lost the title to Warrior.
Mm-hmm.
So he was kind of on the downside, and
Rest in peace, Jim.
the down low and hanging out. And so basically, they were harassing Beefcake, and I think their motive behind this storyline wise, as we
Bring
go
Hogan
again,
back.
was to get Hogan to come back to the company.
Yeah.
So they smashed Beefcake's face. He's wearing the thing. They set it up for WrestleMania. Hogan comes back, challenges him to a tag match for the titles, because at the time, Money Inc. was the tag team champions. Were the tag team champions, whatever. I'm the tag team champions. Sorry, Daniel Bryan reference. Anyways, couple of things we took away from this match, more than, because I think we were concentrating more on the other tag team match, the match itself. We took little things away from this match because it was such a good match to watch that there were little things to notice.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing we noticed, tag ropes.
Yeah.
Now, for those of you that are new to wrestling and you watch tag team matches nowadays, I'm pretty sure you have no idea what a tag rope is. Because nowadays it looks like a shoelace hanging off the turnbuckle. Back in the day,
Big, heavy
tag
gauge.
ropes were, we're talking big around as a dime.
Yep.
Had a nice big shackle holding it. Had a loop on the end of it because you had to keep your hand on it.
At least one finger had to be looped in.
Yep. You had to be in contact with the tag rope at all times, and it was shackled to the corner, to the turnbuckle, or to the loop that holds the turnbuckle. And you had to maintain contact with this tag rope, and then you would be able to tag yourself in. If you didn't have a hold of the tag rope, the tag was not legal. Now,
No!
nowadays, you could be halfway down the ring apron, halfway in between the two posts, and the tag's legal. It's deterioration, again, of the tag team division. Kind of our running theme for this video. The other things you could do with the tag ropes, which we saw happen, was IRS unbuckled it from the corner, got into the ring with it, and choked out Brutus Beefcake with it. One of the greatest heel moves ever, besides the one of get your opponent in the corner, wrap the tag rope around his neck, and put your arm around him in a rear naked choke so that it just looks like you're holding onto him with your arm, where in the meantime, you got this rope pinned up against his neck and it's choking him out. Referee don't see it.
Back then, that was great to watch. Even if you didn't like the heel guys, you were only about the faces. You still wanted to see it. You knew it was coming at some point. It was great when you did.
And you're yelling at the TV for the ref that
He's
you're
got
like,
the rope around his neck.
I mean, come on, how could you not see this?
Yeah.
And this match was just all out brutal. It was just beating on each other, beating on each other, beating on each other.
They brought the briefcase out.
Yeah, and
the Halliburton.
Yeah. Jim Ross liked to call it a Halliburton.
Any of you smart people out there might kind of catch that.
I've never heard that term used for a briefcase before, but
I think it's because it was a brand, kind of like Samsonite.
Yeah, but I thought
Samsonite.
I thought Halliburton was the Dick Cheney thing.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
I think he named that, briefcase safe.
Dick Cheney. Is he the Penguin? Thought this was a Riddler themed.
Woo-hoo-hoo. Riddle me this.
Exactly.
Wrestle me this. One of the things I take away from the match, watching it now and remembering, being a kid, when they wrestled Brutus's, mask off of him.
Yeah.
And I remember because I was such a big Brutus Beefcake fan, and, storyline wise, his face, had titanium plates as it was put during the match by Macho Man. Titanium plates, which is even funnier nowadays. I remember as soon as they took that mask off, I was like, no, don't touch Brutus's face, man. He's got to be able to continue to wrestle. I know now it was all storyline. I mean, he did have a damaged face. I remember something happened in an accident that he actually did break some facial bones, and that's why he was gone for a while.
The parasailing accident.
Right. And I remember thinking they take that thing off and it's over. He's not going to be able to wrestle anymore. And they hit him right in the face with the briefcase. And I remember watching it, and I was like, "Oh my God, Brutus is all done wrestling." It was back in 17 years old, and it's fake still, but they hit him in the face after knowing he actually had plates in there.
Yeah.
You know, I was kind of upset. You know, they did that to Brutus, man.
So, of course, with this being a Hulk Hogan match, Earl Hebner's the referee because nobody else was allowed to referee Hulk Hogan's matches.
Who else gets personal referees?
And John Cena. So anyways, and if any of you know the history of the Hebner family, and I'm talking all three of them, Dave, Earl, and Earl's son, Brian, they all get knocked out at some point during their matches. It's like in their contracts or something. There's a clause where, like, you know, you got to take a bump and get knocked out.
You're going down.
Yeah, you got to take a bump and get knocked out every match.
Big spots.
It's just how it goes. So something happened. I don't. It was like one guy on another guy, and Earl's trying to pull him apart, and it just, you know, hit him, and he's down. Whatever, you know, it's like you could blow on Earl Hebner wrong, and he's out for 10 minutes.
Because that's what it calls for.
Exactly. So he's got the earpiece in, and they're telling him, Earl, stay down.
So Brutus puts on the sleeper.
Yeah, so Brutus puts the sleeper onto DiBiase, who had Hogan in the $1 Million Dream, which is his own modified sleeper hold. Hogan goes and grabs the...
Halliburton?
He grabs the face mask.
Oh, that's right, the mask, yeah.
He grabs the mask out of the corner that they had ripped off of Brutus's face, smacks DiBiase in the head with it, smacks IRS in the head with it, throws it out of the ring. Now, at this point, Earl's still unconscious. This man could sleep for days, apparently, by getting hit one time. So the two of them cover both of them at the same time. And you see Jimmy Hart outside, who's there with Hogan and Beefcake. He gets into the ring, and the commentators are trying to figure out what he's going to do. And Jimmy Hart got his custom airbrush jacket on, turns it inside out. It's got the referee stripes on the inside. He gets down. He counts to 3 with both hands because both guys were being pinned. And the crowd exploded. Like this was a legal decision. Like a second referee had come from the back and counted the 3. He goes out of the ring to the timekeeper's table, grabs the belts, hands them out to the guys. They get up on the ropes, and they're, you know...
And the crowd is going nuts.
And the crowd is crazy because they think, you know, they counted the 3 along with them, and they think this is the end of the match.
And what would happen if it were today? The crowd would be yelling, bullshit,
yeah,
bullshit.
Yeah, it's
disrespectful.
Cynical crowds these days, man, let me tell you. So we got our second incidence of the second referee coming from the back. So the second referee comes running in from the back. Somehow Earl Hebner wakes up at this exact moment. He just knows it's time to wake up. So they get him conscious. You know, he's doing the Hebner, you know, he's you know, kind of woozy and just, you know, falling all over the place. And the guy tells him, look, Hogan grabbed the mask, popped them both in the face with it. So they ring the bell, and the official decision is disqualification. So, I mean, it wasn't even a win for Hogan and Beefcake, so the titles don't change hands.
Nope.
The fun part of the match, though, as if none of this was fun, is after the match is over, IRS and DiBiase hightail it with their titles. They left their Halliburton behind.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bad thing to do. So it's in the corner, and a little production issue. They were about to cut away to Todd Pettengill until somebody noticed that they had the briefcase in their hands. And so they get the briefcase open, and they find things, you know, some boring things, you know, tax papers. Obviously, it's IRS.
Takes out a brick.
There's a brick in the briefcase, which, you know, like Bobby Heenan said, you never know when you're going to need a brick.
Mm-hmm.
And then what they find in the briefcase is giant wads of cash. Real cash. Now, a lot of it, to their credit, a lot of it looked like singles. $1 bills. We did catch a glimpse of some 5s and 10s.
Mm.
So what do with the money? They throw the briefcase down. They go outside the ring.
They handed out the money.
Just start handing money out to the crowd. Yeah, I just got some of my ticket price back.
Yeah, you're in Vegas. What the hell? It's like you hit a slot
Yeah,
machine.
right. He just handed me this $10 bill. I just paid for this hot dog I just had.
That's right. Well, back then that might have been 2 or 3 hot dogs.
Yeah, hot dog and a soda, $10. What the hell? I can go throw this down on some blackjack.
That's right. And it probably did too. It's Vegas.
I gotta say that was the funniest part of the pay-per-view.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was definitely.
It's fun too. I mean, it's WrestleMania. You're talking about pageantry. They're handing out money to the crowd. Like some of it was like big wads they handed to one person, and then some of it was
just like
loose,
whip it
loose
into
throw.
them.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
That
Pretty
whole
cool to see.
like that whole thing when Donald Trump made it rain money in the arena. Although those were $100 bills, and yes, those were also real.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah, but we're working on a 1993 salary here, and we're not Donald Trump. Although we were Vince McMahon, and
He wasn't on that level yet.
well, that's how the rich stay rich. You hand out dollar bills to your fans.
Give dollar bills to the fans, and they give you 50 back.
So, a little break in the action. I guess they had to wipe down the ring or something. I don't know. They send the squeegee boys out from the NBA. Come out to towel down the ring. So they cut it back to, we cut to Todd Pettengill in the audience, and he's there with Natalie Cole. Now, this is just random celebrity sighting. Natalie Cole's in the audience.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't see her sing the national anthem. She didn't sing God Bless America. Nothing. All we got was, hey, Natalie Cole's here.
What's cool was back then, like the WrestleManias, this is when celebrities actually wanted to go. You didn't always pay them. Like, yeah, there were previous appearances with Pam Anderson and other ones and stuff like that where
Right.
they were paid to be there.
Right.
But there were legitimate celebrities all the time at WrestleManias back then. Yeah.
Regis, he just wanted to be there to be
Yep.
there. He didn't care that they were paying him. Bob Uecker
Yep.
showed up at one of them. Donald Trump hosted 2 WrestleManias in a row. One because he knew it was going to make him money, but he's a legitimate wrestling fan. I mean, hey.
Natalie
his
Cole
thing.
at the time, big singer.
Huge.
Big time singer, and if you don't know who her dad is, guys, go jump out a 3rd-story window into 2 feet of snow.
Don't do that.
You might piss off the mayor of Boston.